Hello everyone, B1B Flyer here. I've got a demonstration of how to place decals ready for you. I'm going to go over some of the things that I do to place decals. Doesn't mean it's the right way, but I'll just tell you what I do and you can vary it from there or provide your tips and comments in the section below. So what I've got here are some decals that I'm going to be putting on for the yellow mechs that I've been painting in the previous series. These are from Fighting Piranha Graphics. You can get decals from various sources. You can get them from model cars and things like that as well, but these are probably the best that I've seen. I have quite a few of them and I never really have issues with them. So that's what we'll be putting on today. So for things that you want to consider for decals is you obviously need to use water. Again, we'll be using distilled water so they don't get any tide marks. I've got a little bit in here. And then another thing that you can use that will help, especially if you have a lot of texture on the miniature or the paint got grainy or maybe the dry brushing got a little bit uneven, is something called Solvaset. It's a decal setting solution. There's also another company that makes a similar one called Microsol. This is actually part of a two-part series, Microset and Microsol. Again, not required to have these, but what those solutions will do is help the decal settle into all the actual textures on the miniature and give it a more painted on appearance, especially after you've clear coated it. So another thing that you will want is something to apply your decals with. You definitely recommend brushes. I use a old liner brush that I actually trimmed down. I believe they're synthetic bristles. They're fairly firm. And I've got another kind of this is a beat to death brush, but it works really well for me, so that's what I use. You can also use tweezers. I'm not as careful or as accurate, I think, with those. I tend to tear up the decals when I use those, so that's just my personal preference. Then my go-to weapon for cutting decals out is actually not a hobby blade. It's a Swiss Army knife, little miniature, like the little $9 ones you can get. The Swiss Army ones, though, because the scissors are high quality. These are very sharp for cutting the decals around the actual detail. And I'm going to show you how easy it is simply by cutting around a circle, which with an X-Acto blade, I would have a much harder time doing that. But getting a nice, clean line, because you want the decal as small as possible relative to the design or whatever you have on the decal. There we go. So that's how I do that. These scissors are money. And then for a lot of people will say recommend that you probably want to varnish with a clear coat to help smooth out the surface. That gets back to that whole decal setting solution. I typically don't. Do that. Doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean you shouldn't, but typically my surfaces are fairly smooth and I don't have an issue when I use the setting solution, so I just go with that. It's an extra step that I don't need. I'm going to seal it anyway, and I just prefer to put everything underneath the clear coat. All right, so I've already cut out some decals. I've already got some decals ready to go here for the miniature. I'm going to go ahead and just put them in the water. You're going to want to wait about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, depending on what decals you get. If you get somebody else's decals, or if I typically find about a minute or two is what works for me. Again, your mileage may vary, but if you see it in the water and the little backing has already fallen off, you've been in long enough. So just keep that in mind. While those are getting soaked through, I'm going to demonstrate the setting solution. So these have already been placed with just water. There's no setting solution on there. And what I'm going to do is go to my Solvaset here, or Microsol I should say, and I'm going to grab not that liner brush, but that beat to death brush because it's got soft bristles. I'm just going to get a little bit on the brush there. And then you're going to need to be careful with this, and this is why you need a soft brush, is because you're re-wetting the decal. So this is going to soak into the decal underneath the crevices, and it's going to get that decal soft and help it settle down. So what you don't want to do is be overly aggressive. You kind of just want to place it on there and then let it do its thing. It's going to take a little bit. And I typically do this 2, maybe even 3 times, especially if there's a deep groove, like there's a panel line between these two here, then I'm eventually going to probably go back and maybe make a little bit of a wash over it to show the line between the panels. But without the setting solution, that area would not recess. The decal would remain flat. Again, if you don't have the Solvaset, that's okay. Or you could even, if you wanted to, cut the numbers in half and then put them on both sides. There's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to this kind of stuff. The other nice thing about the Solvaset is if you do decide to get that, is It comes with an applicator brush. It's a nylon brush though, so just be mindful of that it's probably not as soft as you'd like it to be. All right, so I've got my grasshopper. Let's see how these decals are doing here. They're not quite coming off just yet. That's all right. Forgive me for being off camera for a couple of these. It's hard to get around what I'm looking at. And I'm just trying to coax this decal off. Make sure you keep your brush wet. Another thing that these are very prone to doing is scratching. So if you ever drop your decal or it's dry maybe and it's sitting on the table and it's upside down, don't try to scrape it along the table to pick it up with your finger. Use a damp brush from behind and pick it up and flip it over and then get it in the water or whatever you need to do with it. You'll be better off because you'll see little marks and nicks in these if you get any sort of surface. There we go. Now it's breaking free. If there's any sort of surface abrasion, so like I said, you'll want to give these about a minute. I had to try to do this to time it for the video. Now I'm just working the decal, keeping that surface wet. If you find you just can't get it placed right and it starts to dry out, just dip your brush in the water, put a little bit of water on there, and go back to getting it where you want it to go. See if this other one's ready. Yep, came right off. It's upside down. Okay, so that's how you place the decals. You're going to completely want to let it dry. Again, once you've done let it dry with the water, go back, put your decal setting solution on there if you want, if you have it available. I'll do another coat on this to get it to snuggle in. And then once that's completely dry, that's when you want to put a clear coat on, definitely, because those decals will be very prone to rubbing off and flaking. You definitely want to get something over the top of them. Even a brush-on solution, if you don't want to do the whole thing, would be something I'd recommend. All right, so there you go. Please subscribe, visit camospecs.com, visit our Facebook page. Until next time, thanks for watching.